The views and opinions expressed during Love and Life with Lana and Dave are those only of the speakers and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or the position of our podcast hosts or affiliates. Any content provided is not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, club, organization, company, individual, anyone, or anything. All right, let's do it.
You're listening to Love and Life with Lana and Dave, the podcast where logic is power and you take control. Thank you for tuning in and making the choice to listen in and get ideas for your own love and life. Now, here are your hosts, Lana Williams and David Vaccaro.
This is Lana. We are now in 2024, and the quick stop to realize that we're in 2024 and ask ourselves how we got to 2024. A lot of us probably still remember 2004, and we're trying to figure out where 20 years went. So this podcast is just going to basically be a little housekeeping, a little picking up some stuff that I wanted to clear up. It's going to be sort of a hodgepodge, so it's not going to really be anything specific. I'm just going to address a lot of past stuff and make sure that any specific things that we have not covered, get covered, repeat a few things, review a few things. 2023, we had some really good podcasts. Some of my favorite, of course, are going to be the guest podcasts. So episode 3 would have been my first favorite of 2023. Of course, you know, Dave and I did a lot of podcasts, and don't get me wrong, it was a lot of fun. But episode 3, and of course, you want to start with the first episode of 2023, The Process of Building Success from Childhood Trauma. That's with Christina Vitagliano. That she's a friend of mine and basically had written a book called Every 9 Minutes. It was just a really good episode. She has a lot of insight about childhood trauma, sexual assault, things that had happened within the family, and then a lot of good stuff about her life and how she actually took that and doubled down and focused on her life and cried and basically, you know, it's a story of a bunch of things. One, compartmentalizing and dealing with trauma, and then understanding later on in life how to make it all make sense and put it all together in an equation that flows, and even being able to turn it around and actually help people with it that may have the same issues, that may need some information or need some support. Or her story is very good for people who have gone through the same thing or similar in that they're trying to find their way and understand how to deal with it. Someone out there can tell a story that makes you feel like you're less alone, or that you can relate to your own trauma in some way that actually is supportive and helpful. And so if nothing good can come out of something like that, the least, or if anything good can come out of that, you know, that would be the good thing, is that you can actually take something like that. And, you know, going by my last podcast at the end of 2023 with DBT, to take that and make meaning out of it and maybe hand it to even one person who's dealing with something similar or has some sort of trauma that they can relate to yours, and maybe that gives them the courage or the strength or the vision to take a step in a certain direction when maybe they weren't able to do it before. Then for most people, that would be, as far as they were concerned, worth it. And a lot of these people that have gone through something and then turned it around and tried to make sure others knew about it have helped lots of people. I mean, one is good, but obviously the more people we help, the better. But it's worth it if you help just one person, you know, and there's so many of us that if we all helped one person, we could do the math on that, right? And then from there, the next great podcast that I loved was, of course, Coach Costa, and the Beautiful Project, and that's BEYOUTIFUL, and that's the podcast we did. That was a 2-parter with Nicole, who had done a bunch of different things in her life, but starting off as, you know, a bartender, and then a dance teacher, and then getting into fitness and being a personal trainer, but also getting into fitness modeling and a lot of those other things, and just getting some just down to earth as far as I'm concerned. You know, there's a lot of people in my life, including, I go back to Christina and say she's as well. I try to keep people around me who are very grounded and who have a lot of, they just basically don't sugarcoat things. They tell you, whatever you need to know, but they give you good information. I'm one of those people that I believe that there's people around me, as much as you would want to idolize people that are famous and celebrities and all that kind of stuff. I like to sort of look to people I know that have gone through some stuff. Those are the people in a way that I idolize, are people that I actually know and can talk to and have stood in front of me. And I can get really good, deep, valuable information from them that maybe I can take and use towards my own life, or in some way I can relate to understand that, like, that they're just, and again, a lot of people that I tend to gravitate to and tend to bond with, maybe it's trauma bonding, I don't really know, or maybe I wonder if people that I'm very close with are just close with me because we've been through the same kind of things as children, or if everybody I run into has just been through a bunch of crap, and it's not really so much that I'm picking and choosing as that just like everybody has trauma. Maybe I'm picking people with trauma that's like closer to mine. Maybe it's just, it's not as selective to me as I think it is. I'm not sure. I always wonder that. But people that, in my opinion, have taken things and have turned their lives around, or have applied some structure to it to try to like build on things that they've dealt with, those people are important to me, especially if they're people that I know. I just, for some reason, it makes more sense to me for people that like I've actually been around, so trying to bring those people to people that are listening to this podcast in hopes that, they'll see what I see and they'll grab some valuable information from what these people have to offer. That would be good, right? So in a lot of ways, I'm a liaison, or whatever you want to call it, an information seeker, a resource finder, a resource provider. And that's just something I do. There are people that come to me all the time about something that they may need or want, or they don't need, they're trying to understand. And sometimes I may take a person and hand that person off to them and say, hey, this person here can tell you everything you need to know. And it's just a weird thing. But sometimes I can kind of put two people together that may benefit from trading information. So in this podcast, I have tried to do that a little bit. And in those episodes, and that would be episodes 4 and 5, the logic of being a much better you, parts 1 and 2 with Nicole Costa of the Be Beautiful Project. And she has her podcast, right? And if you go through, I'm actually going to send you to our page so that you can kind of go through, because for each episode, we've got show notes. And for those 2 episodes, we actually have show notes in the podcast. And everything else that Nicole wanted us to say about her, those are all things that are within that podcast in the show notes. So and rather than read it all off to you, I'm going to send you there. But that's my second favorite podcast. We had a couple of good guests last year, and that was one of them. That's some very interesting information. And of course, we basically wanted to kind of highlight her podcast as well, because at that time it was starting. I think she maybe had done 1 episode at that time. She is coming out with a season 2, so that's kind of cool. And she's done some other stuff in the meantime. So you do also want to, seek her out, look for her, Nicole Costa, right? Like my third guest of last year would have been my brother Frankie. So we had him on, and he did tell us about quite a few things, including some stuff about Area 51. We got into a little bit of stuff about voice cloning, and we got into a little bit of stuff about AI and computers and just in entertainment and some stuff like that. And that was kind of a really fun thing. We did touch on a few things that we jumped around, but we just had a good time, and that was great. And those are 2 episodes that I enjoyed. I still like listening to. Those were episodes 7 and 8 from last year. And then finally, we had my friend Melissa, and she's the DBT therapist that I brought out to you in December of last year. And that was been probably your holiday episode, right? Because it was a 3-parter. And so those episodes would have been 29, 30, and 31. And the last episode, which is 31, would have been, of course, the one before this one. We had a lot of valuable information, and, we started to sit down and talk, and, expected it to be 20 minutes, and it turned out to be 2 hours. And so I have to once again apologize to everybody for breaking that up into 3, but it was really long, and I just thought you guys would be horrified if you saw a 2-hour episode. It's possible in the future that I might release that separately as one huge long episode, because there were a couple of people that were really frustrated with having to wait to the next week because the information was so good, because the information was so valuable and there was so much of it. And when she started to listen, she's real good at what she does. And so when you start listening to her, you got really into it. And so it was, I'm sure, frustrating for some people to be totally cut off and have to wait for another week. But also it did create a little bit of, suspense and cliffhanging, which, we can't say we don't love that, right? So I apologize we had to do it, but if it brought up our listenership, then great. So the thing that I wanted to do housekeeping wise was with the podcast that we did over DPT and Melissa. And that podcast, I got to read off the name of that podcast just so you can find it. But again, it should be the 3 episodes preceding this one here. The Logic of Emotional Regulation is the name of it. And of course, it was 3 episodes, I think December 7th, 14th, and 21st. And then we took the break for Christmas and New Year's. That's where all that information is. And basically what that was about was, it was a long story, but I had gotten into it from a conversation I had after I saw someone that was older than me just lose their mind and throw a tantrum and act sort of like somebody who was 4 years old. And I just couldn't. Sometimes I'm just really dumbfounded by stuff I see. And I also have, because of the fact of I have the childhood I had and the fact that I almost overregulate in a sense. And I'm learning about that. Hey, even at my age, I'm still trying to improve and learn about myself and figure stuff out and make tweaks and changes and improvements and that kind of thing. Or as much as I can understand about myself, I always will try. So I did learn that I overregulate. So, it doesn't make me cooler than anybody else, but there's a really, really long distance between what happens to me and then how I handle it. There's a gap there. I understood from the podcast that we had with Melissa that you can build that gap within your brain, you can train your brain to kind of take that time and weigh out consequences. And I guess there are some people that just there's certain things that you do with your brain that become a habit. And I think if you have a short fuse and you continue to act with a short fuse, I think that it's just a habit that you build. And so there are people who just fly off the handle and it takes them about a half a second to react to something that's happening to them. And there's almost no regard for how that thing is going to play out or what's going to happen. And what I saw was, without getting into any details or any personal information, I just saw somebody completely lose their shit to the point where it looks like they did themselves damage professionally and with friendships. I mean, there were people, because of how they were and because they were just unloading and reacting, it was almost almost like a blackout occurred where they just didn't care. They were just upset with everybody. And they took people down personally. They got involved in people's personal lives and they broadcasted stuff that was just none of their business just to get back, just sort of a reaction to get back at somebody and sort of taking down everybody with that person. To me, anyway, when I see somebody do that, it's almost like it, to me, reflects on them. The people that they're going after, you could say whatever you want about somebody else, but if you're the one that's flipping out and acting like you're 4 years old, I'm really going to point to you as the issue. The other person, what they're doing or not doing is almost irrelevant. Maybe you will reveal something about somebody that's doing something they shouldn't be, but the way that it's happening is really, it's unhinged and it's unprofessional. And in my opinion, if you work in establishments that are fairly public and everybody kind of knows you, if you're going to try to take down somebody's, livelihood or whatever, because you're upset, I just don't understand it. It's just sort of and I'm going to take a sidebar for a second because that's what this episode is about, right? It's going to be all over the place. And this thought comes to my mind. And I think I mentioned it in one of our first episodes or whatever, but if you're a woman that's out and about and, men are approaching women, you go out somewhere and guys are coming up, hey, how you doing or whatever, and they're trying to shoot their shot. There is such a thing as reacting to somebody you're not interested in such a way that you're turn off everyone else that is interested in you that you might want. That's a thing. So if you're a professional and you have a career in whatever it is, if you go on social media and you you have a fit over something that happens to you and you go on social media and you just start blasting everyone and taking down people and talking about people's personal lives, you may not like, because of something professional or occupational that happens to you, you're going to sort of burn bridges for stuff that you might be able to do to recover from whatever it is that's happening to you. And I just think that's weird that somebody wouldn't consider that. You're just burning all of your networking connections and all of your close friends. People that have known you for years are going to at some point say, what are you doing? Like, they're going to start questioning whether or not they need to stay connected to you, because that's something, if you're going to do that to somebody that would know somebody for years and years and years and years and then just flip on them like that. If you're really close to somebody like that, you're going to question, am I somebody that's going to get thrown under the bus for some ridiculous reason? And so anyway, there was a whole lot more to the story, but I saw that happen, and we're getting back to Melissa now because, of course, I took a really long turnaround, and I hate to tell long stories, but that's what we do here. In my dumbfoundedness and in my confusion, I think I started to have a conversation about that with her. And there were other things we talked about too, but that's kind of how this podcast got off the ground. Like, hey, what is it going on with adults that don't have like the capacity to navigate like their emotional, what have you, like they are just, once they get up to 20, even 30, 20, maybe you can kind of let it go a little, but once you start to hit 30, now you're dealing with like a fully developed frontal lobe. Somebody's an adult. They're done cooking. They're finished being created, and there's no more growth in your brain to go. That's it. At that point, once you get into your mid-30s, late 30s, your 40s, and you are flipping out and screaming and yelling and whatever, driving your car into things and punching walls, to me, what are you doing? Especially if you're a full-grown adult. So I'm surprised. It's a little bit surprising to me to see that happening with somebody that's after a certain age. And I was having a conversation with her about that. And basically it was, how does this happen? Oh, I just so happened to hit a note with her, and she's like, well, this is what I do. This is what I do. I teach adults all day long, every day, how to self-regulate, because so many people do not know how to do it. So I try to give them the tools to do it and that kind of thing. So you'll hear in the podcast, that's kind of how it started. That was what the podcast, was about. Of course, we got into some other stuff, but there's some really, really good insight in those podcasts. So it doesn't matter whether you feel like you've self-regulated or not in your life, or whether you feel like if it applies to you or not. There's so much in these 3 episodes that you're going to find something in there that's valuable that you can apply to something. Almost everything I read or almost everything that I listen to, I find it's so crazy, but it doesn't matter if it applies to me personally or not. There's always something I'll find in each and every thing that I listen to or research or read, because I don't know, if you're open to it, there's always something in there that you can apply. Oh, well, this isn't completely specifically about me, but here's one portion of the thing I'm listening to that I can kind of take and apply to this thing that's going on in my life. I don't know. That's just the way I am about everything. So you will find stuff in that podcast. I'll be surprised if you listen to that whole podcast and you don't find one thing in there that you can apply to yourself, somebody a situation that happened in your past, maybe something that's going on now at work, at home, whatever. But the thing I wanted to add to that was, we did get a question from Melissa after the podcast aired. We had said, hey, do you want to, give us some questions? Send us a message on that. More than welcome to send us questions about anything, any of the podcasts that you listen to, and there's something that you have a question about. Catch us on our website. All of our social media platforms are there, our 800 number and all that kind of stuff. So it should be easy to send us a quick message. Also, most people can find the two of us, myself or Dave, and toss an email at us. But I did have a question from Melissa because of that podcast. And the question was, does DBT work with children? And that person had mentioned that there was somebody in their family that they thought that would really be amazing for. And so Melissa's response to that was, oh, good question. DBT helps children if it is modified and provided by a skilled child therapist, which, that's another facet of therapy, but I'm quite sure that, this is well established. Used as a school intervention, it's not effective. The magic is in the modification to meet children's developmental age and stage instead of demanding adult-like regulation from them, which is, of course, which makes sense. And she mentioned we have a child DBT therapist who works with kids as young as 5. So if you listen to our podcast with Melissa related to self-regulation and you're wondering if there's any kind of child therapy for that, it's absolutely a yes on that you can look that up. You can either speak with the therapist you're working with and they can probably recommend someone, or it should be easy enough to look up. But if you have any problems with not knowing where to look or how to find something like that, I have no problem running that by her if she has a really good method for finding an effective therapist for that sort of thing. So I just wanted to do some housekeeping on that. I wanted to go over a few episodes from 2023. But things we can work on in 2024. I did mention some stuff that I'm going to bring up now in past episodes. I'm just going to single them out and read them or review them separately. And one of them is if you are someone who, and this is going to come out of left field because it kind of doesn't have anything to do with what I just discussed, but that's hodgepodge is the way it is. If you're the type of person who doesn't like to be alone, you may want to see if there's a way to change that. There are people that I know that could not stand to be by themselves that eventually over time became people that really cherished their solitude and really loved their solitude. And at one point or other were unwilling to give up some of their solitude for companionship. And this is talking about friendships. Obviously, your coworkers are your coworkers. Sometimes you have to work. It depends on what you do. Sometimes you have to do a job and the people on that job are people you have to deal with. So you can't really pick and choose when it comes to that. If you are an entrepreneur or if you do freelance work, then you have a little more of a range of, hey, I don't need to work with that person or whatever the case may be. So I don't know if occupational is the right place to frame this, but with your friends and, with your family, and I don't care what anybody says, if you have family that is not good for you, then they're not good for you. It doesn't matter if they're related to you. I know I personally, as Gen X and some generations previous to mine, and maybe one generation after mine, there was an emphasis on blood is thicker than water. However, if somebody is doing some traumatic harm to you, or they are manipulative or narcissistic or doing something that is, actually doing damage to you as a human being, there's no reason to continue putting up with that because you're related to that person. I'll stick by that. I will. But the thought I'm having here is if you really don't like to be alone, if it really bothers you to be alone and you can't be with your own thoughts and you can't just kind of sit and chill and enjoy your solitude, you're going to want companionship and you're probably going to compromise yourself to get it. Therefore, you're probably going to try to pull people in and you're going to be not very discriminatory about who you're pulling in. Maybe there'll be a thought that goes through your head that says, well, you know what, I just want this person in my life now and I'll deal with whatever comes up later with this person. I just want the companionship now, and then all of the stuff that I have to deal with, whatever drama comes up or whatever comes up where we disagree, well, I'll just worry about that down the road. Well, a lot of times we will compromise ourselves to keep from being alone. And I mean alone as a human being, meaning we want friendships, we want relationships. And there are things in our lives that we want to the point where we will, give up some of the stuff we prefer or give up what we would rather have going on in order to keep that from going anywhere. So all I'm going to say is this in 2024 is just, learn to enjoy your own company. Not because you want to be alone forever, not because you want to push everybody away and become in isolation. That's not that's not really what I mean. But there are going to be times in your life that you're going to have to be by yourself. And it would be so much better if you enjoyed that time. And even maybe at some point you sought that time out. Right? So there are people that can't be alone right now that are thinking to themselves, I would never seek time alone by myself. I can't even imagine that. But if you're there and you're comfortable with it and you kind of get used to it, it does become like serenity to you, right? You don't have to be wired for it. Obviously, there are people who are wired to be around other people. They're extroverts and that's what they do. And we cannot change people that are extroverts into anything other than that. So that's not what I'm trying to say. But you should at least be able to enjoy your solitude. There's going to be points in time where you cannot escape solitude. It's just not going to be possible for whatever reason. So you might as well enjoy that time. Hey, I'm by myself. I've never really had time to crack a book. I've never really had time to take a 40-minute bath and bubble bath with a glass of wine. I've never I never really have downtime to whatever, to go to my favorite drive-thru and have something to eat, and just enjoy it without having to answer questions. Or their kids yelling at me or their phone calls coming in, whatever. So when you have that time, and I would say eventually as you get to enjoy it, try to carve it out and make sure that you have within your week some time where you can just kind of go off and just exhale and relax for 5 minutes, because if you don't, it's actually stressful for you to never have any downtime. If you do enjoy your solitude, your attitude towards who comes into your life is going to change, and it's going to flip in the sense that your solitude is going to be so precious to you that you're going to be very worried about who comes along and interrupts that solitude. So your choice of people that you have around you is going to change. And so it's going to go from, I really wish I could just have somebody keep me company. That attitude of telling everyone else, come on now, everybody wants company and all that kind of stuff, to try to make sure everybody follows your lead as far as you're not being able to be by yourself. But it'll become a thing where you're like, oh, instead of trying really hard to find somebody to come in and fill the space, you'll first recognize you're by yourself and you have some space, and just kind of go, oh, if nothing else, just things like what's going on around you. Are birds chirping? Are crickets chirping? Are you listening to some music? Whatever it is, to try to sit in that thing. Anything comes as a habit, right? If you're not sitting in the moment and enjoying your solitude, then I'm probably going to avoid it because you're just not used to it. I think most people in life are not used to things and fear them because it's the unknown to them. Obviously, it's uncharted, and people just mostly don't like uncharted things, right? Don't get me wrong. I have my own structure and setup and things that I find comforting. So I've done things in my life that were not comforting in order to get somewhere. I've left my comfort zone, but I like my comfort zone, so I totally understand that part of it. But if you enjoy your solitude, just think about this. You're going to be way pickier about who you let into your world. It's going to be a little more like, wait a minute, what is it that you need? What do you want? You're interrupting my solitude now, and I want to select my companionship. I'd rather have somebody that I enjoy in my space. Then it's okay to put my solitude aside for somebody that I enjoy. And so I'm just telling you, as somebody, from somebody that has people around me almost all the time that I enjoy, I almost don't ever have people around me that I don't even, it's to the point now where the quality of people around me is, it's pretty good. It's like 97% perfect in the sense that it's people I want to be around. I enjoy. They don't stress me out. They don't exhaust me. I don't have to question myself. There's no drama going on. Why am I around this person? Oh, this person's dragging me into a bunch of their stuff. None of that happens with me anymore. When I was in high school, it did, because that's part of the way it goes. And that as time goes on, you cull the herd, and there are people in my life now that they add to my life. They bring value to my life, right? Hopefully I do the same for them. But as far as they're concerned, I bring value to their life, or at least this is what they tell me, right? And being with them is something I look forward to. When I'm going to spend time with specific people, I get all excited about that, the fact that this is going to happen in 2 weeks, in 2 days, whatever. These are the only people I want to be around, are the people that I look forward to spending time with. I can't wait for 3 weeks from now on a Wednesday night, I'm going to hang out with so-and-so. That's the only thing I want to look forward to. I don't want to dread it. I don't want to say, well, I don't really care if I see this person or not. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, there are some people in life you have to spend time with. It's it happens. But if you can get your life down to the point where most of it's controlled by you, or you have some selective ability, and I think the being able to be by yourself is something that I always say that is like a passport. There are 2 passports in life for me. One is to be able to go anywhere you want by yourself. Once you enjoy your solitude and you understand it, and I think the pandemic has helped us in this way. It's done some damage, but it's also given us a couple of advantages. And one of them is there were group activities that we used to do, and society changed in a way where we had to enjoy those things, or we had to do them in a different way. I was speaking with somebody this week about movies. Movies is one of those things. Movies is something that we almost never, for society's sake, going to a movie with other people was like the norm. So you wanted to go to a movie, you called somebody up. You want to go to a movie with me? Or you would get a group together and go, or it would be a date thing. But to go to a movies by yourself was like, with the exception of myself and some people like me, it was pretty much like a social taboo to do that. But when you think about the activity, you really don't talk to them when you're there. It's not like you're all sitting around talking like you would in a restaurant. The only time you would go to a movie and maybe talk to someone else is like before you'd go to dinner in a movie. Before you went to the movie, you'd go to dinner. Or you would go to, the movie and then you'd maybe go to dinner and discuss it, or you'd go out with your friends and have coffee and discuss it, or have drinks and discuss it, or whatever. Hey, this is a specific movie you all want to see. There's some kind of moral agenda to this movie and we all want to see it for whatever reason. And then we all want to go and discuss the movie after it's over, and did we like it, did we not like it, whatever. For the most part, the pandemic kind of forced us to watch movies at home. And I think a lot of the people that usually were in groups at movies, they got their first taste of just like being home and watching a movie. Because I think up until the pandemic, people even went to each other's houses to watch movies, second run, third run on cable, whatever. And unless they lived with someone else during the pandemic, because we were all kind of locked down, we couldn't even really do groups of people in houses watching movies. That was something that really wasn't happening either. So people learned to kind of sit and watch a movie and enjoy the movie. Honestly, I don't think some people go to movies and like pay attention to the movie, because like if they're with a group of people, they're not really focused on the movie. So this I'm not saying it's good or bad, but it's just an option that kind of came into the picture during the pandemic, where people had to sit and watch a movie and watch the movie to watch the movie. It was like, instead of something going on in the background, it was like the main event. So after the pandemic, there's so many more people, I think, that go to theaters solo and they don't think anything of it. Plus, society's changed a little bit. Obviously, 5-10 years ago, it would have been different. But I think the pandemic pushed that further, in the sense that most people do really want to see a movie, but they maybe want the atmosphere of the theater. They want the big screen, or they want the surround sound, or they want the 3D, or whatever it is, or the, that they're getting from the theater. It's important enough to them that they don't care if somebody else goes. Fine. If you want to go, that's fine. There are people who actually will say now, that I didn't see saying it before, sure, let's go to a movie, but like, I want to see the movie. So if we do go together, okay, but if you're talking to me, Tim, you're going to talk to me through the whole movie, forget it. It didn't used to really be like that. So that used to be just me. I was the only one out there doing that kind of stuff. Sure, I'll go to the movie with you, but please don't talk to me during the movie. Like, I don't even want to know you're there. I'll talk to you in the parking lot. I was always like that. I was always like that with concerts. I want to really take in the thing that I paid to see, especially at these theater prices, right? $20, $25, whatever it is for a movie, depending on where you're going. You want the full range of entertainment that you're getting from that money that you're spending, especially between that and your snacks and everything else. You're looking at $40 for a movie sometimes. People talking through it. You're like, don't really want, you could see your friend outside for free, that kind of thing. So anyway, that's one of my thoughts. And that's why I've said it before and what it means. And I'm bringing it forward into 2024 because I believe that people, like, again, you shouldn't enjoy being by yourself to the point where you don't like any other people. And I'm not in any way saying that. But I think more people need to enjoy their company and be able to sit with their thoughts and just be. It's been forever that, for me, that the concept of just being has been important. Just be. Just be. Just breathe. You're sitting in your chair. Maybe you focus on your breath. You do the thing where you're like, oh, my feet are in my shoes. Whatever. You just get that sensory feeling of just being you and sitting where you are and looking around your room and seeing what you see. And just bringing yourself into the present, but then just enjoying your company, just do your own company, things that you don't have time to do that you really enjoy. And maybe if you don't enjoy those things, it's because maybe you've never had time to do them. So maybe discover some stuff, right? Some people like to go out in the yard and go gardening in the yard, and it's like their thing. They go out there, they're out there all day and they're by themselves. That's you time, that's downtime. And if you really love gardening in the yard, it's actually really therapeutic for you. You're out in nature and you're doing something and you're stilling your mind and you're just kind of enjoying yourself in the moment. That's something that I think we all need to do. And I think so many of us are caught in this really crazy schedule where we're doing this and we're doing that and we're on this phone call and that phone call and this Zoom meeting and we're running across town to do this. And sometimes we don't have, until we get in bed at night to go to sleep, any time to reflect or any time to take a break from like the rut and the runaround of life. So, and things that you have to look in the future and say, you know, when I'm in my 80s or my 90s or whatever, my deathbed, what am I going to wish I didn't do? Or what am I going to miss? What am I going to be upset that I never stopped to think about or do? I think this is some of the stuff that you'll be thinking of. All right. So that's part one of our logic we're bringing into 2024. Don't forget, our website is www.lanaaanddave.com. Check us out there for all our podcasts. Give us a 5-star review, subscribe, and download. We'll be talking to you next week with part 2. Hey, you just listened to Love and Life with Lana and Dave. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please share the podcast, leave us a comment or review, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any new content. We'll see you soon.